The single most powerful node inside of N8N is the code node. Yet most people know nothing about it. The code node makes your workflows faster. It can greatly simplify your automations. It lets you build more powerful agents, and it unlocks all the options that custom code brings. But 99% of people will never use the code node because they're scared of it. However, you don't have to be a professional developer to use it. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to use the N8N code node, even if you are a complete beginner. Real quick, I'm hiring a second video editor, so if you know someone or if you are an editor yourself, make sure to apply. The link will be below the video. Okay, so what even is the N8N code node? Well, it is a specific node inside of N8N that you can insert into any workflow that you have. So when you go to top right and click on plus to add a new node, just type in code, and there it is. This is what the code node looks like. Now, there's two types of the code node, JavaScript and Python, which, as you've guessed, let you run different programming language depending if you want to do more of a front-end style. JavaScript is usually better, or some, data processing. Python is usually better, but they both work in the same way. So let's say we go with JavaScript now. N8N will automatically open the node, and it will also give you some pre-written code, which I'm going to explain how it works in a bit. Now, you might be thinking, okay, David, when do you use the code node, right? Because N8N already has a lot of logic and math and conditionals. Sometimes you need to do something unique, something very specific that maybe there isn't any pre-made node in N8N. That's exactly when you need the code node. The code node lets you write custom instructions using JavaScript or Python. And don't worry, you really don't need to be a programmer to use it. I'll show you how you can use AI to write all of the code for us. And I'm not just saying that, I'm literally building a startup myself with the help of AI. I started Vectel when I wasn't a good developer at all. And I certainly didn't know anything about full stack web development. The point is, if AI can help me build an app used by over 60,000 people, it can help you build a simple agent in N8N. Alright, so even though you don't have to understand JavaScript or Python, it is good to understand the input and output of the data, how it is processed in the code node. So every single code node in N8N follows this basic pattern. And we can actually see this if we look at the predefined code that N8N gives us. This part, input.all, includes everything else that comes into this node. So obviously right now, this is a standalone node. Nothing comes in or nothing goes out, but usually you have it inside of a larger workflow, right? So when you want to access the data that is coming inside of the code node, you would use $input.all. And all we have to do is just save that into a variable such as named items or data or incoming data, whatever you want. Or if you want a single item and you don't want the whole array, you can access that with $input.item.json. If this is still confusing for you, let me break it down even more. In N8N, input.item.json gets the current items data. Input.all gets all the items from the previous node. And then to send the data to the next node, such as in this example, we would send it here, we will use a simple return state. So if you know something about programming, this is basically a function, right? It gets some data, it does something with the data, some processing, transforming, calculation, enhancement, augmentation, whatever you want to do. And then it returns part of the data after it was fully processed to the next node so that your N8N automation can continue working. And this is what the syntax for that looks like. Return, curly brackets, JSON colon, another curly bracket, your, and then the data as the variable. Oh, and by the way, double slash, these are just comments inside of JavaScript. In Python, that's hashtag, and that's simple notes to make it easier for humans to read. So if you are getting into programming or you're new to writing code, it is good practice to always add comments, especially to the most complicated parts of the code. Or simply ask the AI to include a lot of comments when it gives you the code so that you actually understand. But it gets better because the code node is a lot more powerful than you think. In fact, N8N gives us a lot of predefined tools and functions and methods that can simplify working with the code node. So let's look at the most useful. First one is this.helpers.http request. This allows you to make API calls to external services inside of the code node. And by the way, you can find all of these just by typing $. So we go back into N8N, we open up the code node, boom, $, you can see this suggestion, right? So N8N proactively shows you what are the pre-built methods or variables that you can use to even more things even easier. The second one is this helpers HTTP request with authentication. So this makes an API call that utilizes the safe credentials you have in N8N. That could be like a Google Drive or, Telegram, whatever you have. It can use those credentials to make an HTTP request. The third one and fourth one we already talked about, so we can skip past through them. But the fifth one is interesting because it lets you get all the data from a specific previous node. So unlike number 3, input.all, this is from the incoming node, right? So the node that right before the code node. Well, let's say there is like node all the way at the start of your automation that you want to access. Well, you would just do $, name of that node, and that's how you access the data from a node that not the one before the code node. Next, $JSON is another super useful thing to know. This is a quick way to access the current items data. $now gets the current date and time, and you can use this in prompts as well. So for example, when you have open up an AI agent in N8N, boom, and you're gonna add a system prompt here. If you switch to expression, you can say today is, and then do $now. Today is, and then double curly brackets, and you can see that there is some suggested thing, and you can do like if empty JSON, but you can do now, and the result would be the datetime object being passed into the system prompt of the AI agent. And it works the same inside of the code node. So you could do something like constant current date equals $sign now. I don't know if it's best JavaScript practice, but you get the point. Personally, I'm more of a Python developer myself. Next, today, same thing, but without the all the time, you know. Then $sign workflow. This gets information about the current workflow, right? So such as this one is named the code node. So maybe that, you could get the offer, the ID, whatever, a bunch of other stuff. Execution, that's info about the current execution. So if you want to have the code node work with that in real time, I mean, this is getting pretty advanced, but N8N has it if you need it. And then $env accesses the current environment variable. So these are just some of the built-in helpers and methods that N8N gives us so that we can do even more with the code node. Now here's an example of a very simple code node that does multiple things and utilizes some of these helpers, right? So first we define a new variable named data and we put in the first current item. Next we define another variable and it's going to be an array or a list of items. And in there we're going to save all of the items from the incoming node. Then we define a third variable named previous data. And here we're going to use the syntax from number 5, actually number 6, because we use that first method, but we get data from a specific node. This time it's named HTTP request. Could be any node that is before code node in the workflow, right? So maybe you have like a bunch of other nodes here. You want to add a specific one, just put in the name. That's it, just the name, and then that first, and then that JSON. So we have 3 variables, and then we're going to make a simple API call. So we await this helpers that HTTP request with the get method. So these are the headers of the request, and then the URL. So obviously this is an example URL, and here's how we get the time. Now obviously the code nodes can get way more advanced than this. Could be hundreds of lines. You can basically do anything you want with the code node, but I just want to show you the basics. All right, so let's get practical. What are some situations when it makes sense to use the code node? Well, let me give you 4 specific examples that you can start applying in your N8N automation today. Number 1 is grouping orders. So here's what that code might look like, and feel free to take a screenshot, put it into ChatGPT and adopt it for your own automation. But basically, let's say you have a large amount of data, right? Such as 1,000 orders. Could be also like a couple hundred lists or different strings. Basically, a lot of data that is structured in a different way. That would be a nightmare to do with the standard set node or the standard filter node in N8N. So in this case, the goal is grouping the orders together. So what this code does is that it groups the orders together by the customer's name and then calculates total spending for each person. So even though you might send 1,000 orders of unstructured data into this, or it is structured but in a chaotic way, not in an easy to understand way, even like 10, 15 lines of code can return beautiful, simple sentence such as John spent $45, Sarah spent $120. And this you can maybe insert into the system prompt of an AI agent. Now to kind of generalize this, the first situation where you would use the code node is when you want to process a large amount of data in your N8N automation. Because the regular nodes can group or calculate, but they cannot do it both at once. And especially if you have a lot of data, it can be very chaotic adding a bunch of different nodes into your N8N workflow, where all that it takes is just adding a single code node that can do it all. So this is why when you see, you know, some of these content creators show you like these 50 nodes and like this ultimate AI agent, blah, blah, blah. A lot of the times they're just scared to write a single line of code and they don't know nothing about code, nothing about computer science. They are scared of the terminal, and those 50 nodes maybe could be 7 nodes, but there would be 1 or 2 code nodes in there. But hey, most people are not willing to learn and they're scared of code, and that's why they will never get the benefit that you will get if you watch this video until the end. And again, I'm going to show you how to do this even if you know zero about Python or JavaScript. And by the way, later I'll show you when not to use the code node, because N8N has a lot of friendly and pre-built nodes that are beginner friendly and that simplify the whole process of designing systems. So even though ignoring the code node is very bad, using it everywhere where it doesn't need to be used is also as bad. So at the end of this video, I'll show you when not to use the code node. All right, second practical actionable example when a code node is great is when there is an N8N node, such as the WordPress node, right? It exists. It is pre-built inside of N8N, but it cannot do some specific thing. So what this code does inside of this node, it uploads data to your WordPress website. So WordPress, even though it's kind of an old technology, it's still powering hundreds of millions, probably billions of websites today. So this is one of the most commonly used nodes inside of N8N. However, it doesn't support media upload. It can only handle text content like posts and pages. But luckily, since N8N has the code node, we can have these 12 lines of JavaScript, which of course I got AI to write this, to do that for us, right? So something that would have stopped the vast majority of people who built N8N workflows, we can do because we are not scared of the code node. Another practical example is utilizing full advantage of an API when the N8N version, so here we're using Stripe, has limited filtering, which to be honest, it always has limited filtering to make it simpler for people to build, right? Luckily, the code node doesn't have this limitation because in code, you can build actually anything. So here we do an HTTP request with these headers, and for the auth, we want the username, boom, with the API key and the password. And then here we get the exact status, we get the plan, and then we limit that. And then we set a hard limit of 100. So what this code does is that it searches your Stripe for a specific subscription. So let's say you want to find people that are both active and on a premium plan that only get 100 results, and maybe then you want to analyze their behaviors or average order value or the churn. There's a lot of situations in which you might need this data. So why do we need a code node here? Well, the built-in Stripe node can't search by a custom field, right? It's quite limited, as you can see, and it cannot combine multiple filters such as both active or both premium. And again, this is not just the issue with the Stripe node. A lot of different N8N nodes are simplified for non-developers, which makes it easier to work with them, but it limits us if we want to build more powerful automation and AI agents. But the code node lets you search with multiple specific conditions at once, which the regular node doesn't support. Now there's one more useful situation in which you need to use the code node, which is extracting and parsing nested JSON data from API response. So the issue is that the built-in nodes, such as the edit fields node, they cannot dig deep into nested data structure. But the code node lets you navigate multiple layers and search inside of complex arrays for the exact values and data that you're looking for. And here is a very simple example. Again, 9 lines of code. So there's a myth that your code nodes need to be hundreds of lines to be useful. That's not the case. Usually the code node is below 50 lines and can still be very, very useful. So again, you don't need a PhD in computer science. Like, all of this can be written by ChatGPT. In fact, I'm gonna show you that right now. Let me show you how simple this is. Open up ChatGPT and describe what you want it to build. Browse the web to understand how the N8N code node works. I'm gonna do instant for this one. Boom. And then I'm gonna switch to thinking or code, because we want a more powerful model for the code. We're gonna do Shopify order, right? So the input data looks like this, and the scenario: find orders where someone bought a large blue t-shirt. Pretty simple. This is actually very applicable right now because there's gonna be a lot of vibe coded apps. Lovable just released their Shopify integration. So if you learn a bit of N8N and if you learn how to use the code node, you'll be able to benefit of this new surge of Shopify stores that have like completely vibe coded front end, completely vibe coded back end, lots of bugs, lots of technical debt. If you can come in and if you know N8N well, and if you know the code node well, you can fix a lot of that stuff and you can charge a lot of money fixing these vibe coded Shopify stores, right? So this is actually a very timely example. Boom, ChatGPT thought for 4 seconds, and here is the N8N node. You can see that this is like probably 40 lines, a bit more JavaScript. So first I told it to browse the web to research the structure of the N8N node, right? To understand how it works and the input data, output data, the stuff I already explained basically. So again, let me show you from scratch. Boom, code node. We'll use JavaScript because that's what ChatGPT wrote, but you can tell it to do Python. 40 lines of code. As I said, usually it's below 50. You can do like basically anything below 100 lines. I mean, Karpathy wrote like a whole GPT in less than 100 lines of code in Python. So yeah, if your code is 300 lines for some like data cleaning, you should probably delegate that to ChatGPT. Anyways, you get the point, right? So we've gotten the mode is run once for all items or run once for each item. You should probably tell this to the AI, right? So it knows which mode the code node will be in. But as you can see, ChatGPT left out some comments for us, so we know like, okay, this is a helper. Boom, quick exit on product title if you want to constrain t-shirt only. Then we inspect the properties of the input data. We check the variant title. So there is the core math, and then we return the output, which is formatted here. So items.filter and some JavaScript for how we do the matching and filtering. So as I said, I cannot code in JavaScript myself without AI. I've built N8N automations that use code node, no problem. Why? Because you can just ask ChatGPT or Claude to do that for you. It really is that simple. As I said, you do not have to be a developer to use the code node in N8N. Now, before I show you the situations in which you should not use the code node, let me tell you about how you can actually host your AI agents. Because no matter if we use the code node or not, if you build an N8N automation, you want to make sure that it actually runs. And by far the easiest way to do this is with Hostinger. Hostinger gives you your own VPS. So you literally have your own virtual private server where you can host hundreds, if not thousands of different N8N agents. And by the way, this is what I use for all of the agents that we use at our company. Every person on our team has access to a Hostinger server where we host our N8N agent. And not only is Hostinger super affordable, especially thanks to these Black Friday deals, but it's also very easy to set up. Let me show you. Okay, so now let me talk about when not to use code nodes. Because as I said, never using the code node is obviously very bad, but trying to use it when there are better, simpler solutions is also bad. Oh, and real quick, we're really trying to expand the YouTube team. So if you know somebody who's a great video editor or video producer, send them to vectel.ai/jobs. Or if you yourself are a video editor, go to vectel.ai/jobs and apply. It's a simple Google form, just fill it out, and the best candidates will get an interview. It's as simple as that. So please, if you know great video editors, recommend them, send them this link, tell them to fill it out. All right, so N8N has actually a lot of hidden gems. Kind of N8N is simplifying program, right? So all of these workflows, they've been possible for many years, well over a decade, right? Like you could build like Stripe automation or Google Calendar automations. All of these things, you could build them for many, many years now. That's not what N8N allowed. What N8N did is just, it made it visual, it made it drag and drop. And that is mainly thanks to these pre-built nodes. So here are some examples when not to use the code node. Simple if else. Why? N8N has an if else node. So you might use this when N8N, you need to split the workflow into two paths, true or false, based on a certain condition. And, some data comes in. Let's say if the data includes a positive integer, it's true. If data is false and, the customer is broke and has negative bank balance, it is false. Another example is the edit fields node. So this one can be used to rename fields, adding new fields, or removing fields. You can think of fields as properties in your data, like name, email, price, or date. A good way to visualize this is the different column headers inside of a spreadsheet. Those are the fields. The edit fields node can simply edit them. Another situation where it doesn't make sense to use the code node is simple filtering. So thanks to the filter node, you can keep only items that meet certain criteria, such as if price is over 100 or if status is active. Or maybe you have a Google form for hiring like I do, and you want to filter out people who, are hardworking or something like that. Or maybe people who only have like above 2 years of experience, right? You could do that with a filter node easy. Next up is the merge node. So this can combine data from different sources, right? Let's say you have two AI agents above each other that run in parallel and they output like a conclusion, and you want to merge this into a single email report. That's where you would use the pre-built merge node. No need for a custom code node easily. Next up, aggregate. So this is similar to the merge node, but a bit more versatile. The aggregate node in N8N can be used for calculating or grouping multiple items into a single item. So for example, you can group 100 sales recordings by region and calculate the total revenue per region to create a summary report. Next up is the sort node. So maybe you have a list of customers and you just want to make them from the youngest to oldest or alphabetical order, whatever. You just want to sort the list or the array in some way. Well, the N8N sort node does just that. It puts the items in order, or it can also shuffle them randomly to make them unordered. Now, split out is basically the opposite of aggregate. Separates a single item that contains a list into multiple individual items processing, right? So it could be a list of the orders from the last month. You just want to make sure that you prioritize the oldest ones, or you group it into week, whatever you want to do, right? There's infinite ways where you might use the split out node without using the code node. Now, the HTTP request, another super powerful node inside of N8N that you absolutely should learn how to use, and that unfortunately most people just skip because when they hear HTTP, they're like, WTF, they're scared. It's like hearing terminal. But HTTP is like, that's how the internet works. So learning how HTTP requests get made, send them, how to receive them, how to process them, this really unlocks many different doors, especially if you're building an N8N agent. So this abstracts away the code. So you can make HTTP requests without writing any code, right? So you can make API calls to external services. You can do get, post, put, delete, request, all with this one single node inside of N8N. And you can even set the custom headers with no need for a code node here. This HTTP request node is very powerful. It's one of the most powerful nodes in N8N, to be honest. I'm gonna make a whole dedicated video on that. Let me know if you'd like to see that. Anyways, moving on, date and time. This is a very hidden node that a lot of people don't even know it exists in N8N. But anytime you're working with dates, formatting, adding, subtracting hours, calculating the time between two dates, you can use the date and time here. I think it's built on top of the Python datetime module. We can probably check it out actually. Since N8N is open source, we can honestly just quickly check that. Okay, so here's their GitHub. So V1, V2. Let's look at the V2. Okay, so it's TypeScript, so it's not Python. Okay, I mean, we can look at the division of languages right here. Oh yeah, so N8N is basically almost all TypeScript. All right, well, that's good to know. Anyways, that's a little side quest. Another situation in which you should not use the code node is waiting. When you need to add a simple timeout, simple delay, N8N literally has a wait node. So again, you want to pause the workflow for a specific time interval, or you want to wait until like a webhook returns some data. Just use the wait node. It's a lot simpler. Now, perhaps the most common mistake is doing simple loop. Loop over items is a great node, great versatile node inside of N8N. People think that you need to start doing code if you need to do for loops, while loops, stuff like that. Not true at all. N8N has this great loop over items node that can go over a list, let's say, of 10 things and do specific actions for each thing. So yeah, that's it. The code node, by far the most powerful node inside of N8N. A lot of people are scared of it for no reason. Just start using it. Use ChatGPT to write the code for you. Tell it to add comments so that you understand what the code node does. And just like that, you can build more powerful AI agents and automations than 99% of people using N8N.